Hey folks, Snarky J Cosplay here for my review of Chapter 4 of the Book of Boba Fett. I will say this is actually a fairly solid episode. It's not really saying much compared to the dumpster fire that was Episode 3, but this certainly feels a lot more Star Wars than that Spy Kids nightmare we got served last week. We get some really great backstory. Fennec Shand steals the show from Boba. I worship Boba, but I'm kind of Team Shand after this episode. We get some pretty cool action sequences. There's also some pretty corny stuff that just I think is built into the writing of this show at this point, but it's not bad. And the ending suggests a cameo for next week that actually has me pretty excited. While it is a fairly solid episode, I think that this show just doesn't really commit to being Star Wars. There's still just stuff woven into the writing of this show that makes it feel goofy and out of place. It doesn't really compare to The Mandalorian or anything that we might have expected out of something called the Book of Boba Fett. All things considered, this episode gets a rating of 6.5 out of 10. It sounds like it might be harsh, but it's the best that I can do. And as usual, I am willing to elaborate, and I will. In this episode, we spend about 30 minutes, which is a little over half, in the middle of a flashback. Usually I'd complain, and I have when it's come to episode 2, for instance, but this actually works. It's a flashback sequence that explains how Boba Fett and Fennec Shand came to be this elderly duo, kind of battling their way through the galaxy unsuccessfully. It's still worth watching, and I actually really enjoyed it. It answered a lot of my questions, and it kind of seems nice to see how they really get along. However, as much as I was enjoying it, the scene with the mods, again, took me out. The mod thing of these youths dressed overly well and riding on terribly modified Vespas, they're actually inspired by this weird trend that came about in Britain from like the 50s through the 70s, and that alone is enough to let you know that it doesn't belong on Tatooine. The look might belong on a planet like Coruscant, but I think a gang of rebellious teens would look a lot more Mad Max in a desert territory like Tatooine than as well dressed as they are here. The whole mod scene shows how Fennec got saved by Boba, who took Fennec to the mods to be kind of cyberpunked back to life. But the whole scene is soundtracked by this awful dubstep, which I don't like dubstep to begin with, but I definitely don't like it in Star Wars. It just seems goofy at this point, and it doesn't really work. A different choice of music might have saved the scene, but with that dubstep in the background, I was just rolling my eyes the whole time. I do like that this episode catches Boba right at the end of episode 5, season 1 of The Mandalorian. When those spurs were jingling as he walked up on the sands of Tatooine to rescue Fennec Shand, we all kind of thought that that's who we would see when we were watching it in season 1, and now it's all been obviously confirmed. I don't know why he makes spur sounds sometimes, but not others. We can blame the Foley artists on this for that. As excited as I was to see this partnership develop, and to see him get his ship back, why is Disney insisting on not calling it the Slave One? When he tells Fennec that he's got to get his fire spray gunship back, I literally was snapped out of anything good that I felt about the episode. I'm never gonna call it anything else. You know why? Because Han Solo never references the Millennium Falcon as, hey, I think I left my Corellian light freighter parked over there. No, he always calls it the Millennium Falcon. Everybody calls it the Millennium Falcon. Why are we now calling it by the ship's title rather than the name that both he and Jango Fett called it for pretty much the entire time that they've owned it? Something else that I didn't really like about his conversations with Fennec is that when he talks about the Tuskens, he mentioned that they rescued him and took him in as one of their own. I know that we've basically seen that he was with them for years, and they did eventually come to accept him, but they didn't rescue him. They dragged him on the back of a bantha, enslaved him, and beat the crap out of him pretty much for no reason at first. He definitely had to earn their respect and kind of fought for it more than once. So for someone as vindictive and hard-assed as him to just say that they took him in as one of their own right away, I feel it at least warranted we got off to a rocky start, but we made out like bandits by the end. The next few action sequences were pretty cool. Watching Fennec and Boba sneak their way through this hangar to get to the Slave One, I'm not gonna call it anything else, was pretty neat. Even if I did laugh at the General Grievous-inspired chef bot spinning cleavers and eventually just getting offed by Fennec. Fennec shows off really well during these sequences. I think that we maybe have seen her be a little underutilized throughout this show, but she really spreads her wings and shows off her talents throughout this entire episode. I'm usually a Boba worshiper, but like I said, Fennec just rocks it. And I was especially aligned with her viewpoint here when she's basically just as annoyed with Boba having chased that little droid around the kitchen for like 2 minutes solid. I mean, I was expecting them to start the yakety sax music at any moment. Yeah. Let that sink in. When he finally does get the Slave One, Boba's kind of struggling with it, which reminded me a little of SpongeBob in this one scene where they're steering the Flying Dutchman's ship, just grinding all the wood against a rock and going, "Keep going, you're good, you're good." I literally could not think of anything else. The next scene is one of the cooler, if not the coolest thing that has happened within this entire show so far. I think they've painted Boba as kind of wiser, a little soft, and way more forgiving than we've ever seen him or ever wanted to see him. But he flies the Slave One through the desert and just ices the entire gang of bikers below. And he's got this cold look on his face. I think it was brilliant acting on Tamura's part. It showed that he was so vengeful about what happened to the Tuskens that it worked out really brilliantly for building his character. So afterwards, we get a bit more insight on Boba's armor. There's been a huge debate over whether or not Boba/Jango's armor was Durasteel as opposed to Beskar, but he confirms that it is in fact Beskar and that that's the only reason it survived being in the pit's acid. I don't understand the whole point of just resting the Slave One's face on the Sarlacc pit. I would not have gotten within 10 feet of that thing if I was Boba, but fine, okay, he thought the armor was in it. I guess he forgot that he literally dragged himself out of it with his armor on and collapsed in the sand next to it, but it's not the most ridiculous thing that's happened in this show so far, so we'll just have to forgive it because this is what we've got. I will say, I told you. I'm gonna say it, I told you so. I said in my review of episode 1, if I got to watch Boba Fett drop a seismic charge into the Sarlacc pit and blow it up as his vengeance for it ruining his mug, I could just die happy at that point. They denied us the pleasure of watching him get his vengeance because he was basically having the Slave One pulled into it because of stupid decisions he made, and Fennec is the one who pressed the button. We didn't even get the really cool sound of the seismic charge dropping in. It wasn't even dropped, it just got knocked into it. But again, we'll take what we can get. The show's been worse before. Back in the present, we find out that Black Chrysanthemum is the angriest drunk in the entire Star Wars universe, but we do get to see Boba recruit him, so we're seeing a pretty cool team start to get built, especially if the mod kids get blown up and we never see them ride their little multicolored Vespas again. We'll actually have a pretty cool team at the end of the show. Boba does actually try and recruit the rest of the leaders from Tatooine. However, they basically tell him, we're not gonna work for you, we don't feel like it. He basically makes them a deal. As long as they stay neutral while he fights the Pikes himself, there won't be a problem. And I think that that's a huge power move, because not only does he have them eat above the Rancor pit and shows them what they're facing if they double cross him, he's also telling him, look, you know what? It would work for me if you helped, but the fact that you're not helping me, I can do bad all by myself, and I will take on the Pikes and handle this. So even though he doesn't get them on his side, Fennec's got some ideas about recruitment. And at the end, when she says she's got some ideas, we hear that familiar musical sting implying that we're either getting a cameo from Din Djarin, the Mandalorian himself, or somebody from the Mandalorian show. While I'm excited, I think it's gonna be a huge bummer if this show has to rely on cameos from characters outside of the show to make it interesting to watch. This show should have been awesome. It should have been killer from the start, based solely on who they had as the main character. The show shouldn't have to be saved by Din Djarin and his shiny, beautiful helmet, and it definitely shouldn't have to rely on cameos from any other admittedly very cool bounty hunters to save it. It should have been good on its own from the start. All in all, like I said, I give the episode a 6.5 out of 10. If it was The Mandalorian or any other show, I definitely give it a lower rating because it wasn't that great an episode. There's still a lot of goofy stuff that happens in it, but based on how bad the rest of this show has been so far, it gets a 6.5 and a carefully optimistic thumbs up. With 3 episodes left, let's see where the rest of this show goes, and let's see if those last 3 episodes really redeem it and make it a show worth rewatching. I've been Snarky J, thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and comment your thoughts below. Let me know what you think.